night, y'all, when Donald Trump gave his wall speech, you knew it didn't take him long to try to pimp black people. Press play.
But all Americans are hurt by uncontrolled illegal migration. It strains public resources and drives down jobs and wages. Among those hardest hit are African Americans and Hispanic Americans.
The question is that true? Joining us right now is Dr. Carol Swain, author of Debating Immigration. She says that is the case. Dr. Bill Spriggs, an economist, professor at Howard University, also chief economist, AFL-CIO. Different perspective. So, Carol, I'll start with you. You say Donald Trump is correct that illegal immigration hurts black people?
I've been saying that for years. I wrote my first book, published a book with Cambridge Press in 2007. And one of the reasons that I published that first book was because the black leaders were not speaking to the facts. When you have a oversupply of labor, surplus labor, it hurts blacks, poor whites, as well as Hispanics. Anyone that has a low wage, low educated worker, they are hurt by the competition.
Okay. Bill Spriggs, you studied these numbers quite well, led the economics department at Howard University. What do you say to what Carol just said?
Well, let's separate a couple of things here. First off, the wall has nothing to do with illegal immigration. So spending $5 billion, if you want to help disparately impacted workers, that's not where I'd spend it. Spend it on education, job training. But let's separate that. Second thing is the issue immigration or is the issue illegal? And so if someone is here undocumented and cannot assert their full labor rights, then yes, that hurts everyone in the United States, all hues, because those workers can't assert their rights as workers. But do their numbers and do immigrants hurt? That's not true. Here's the case. Immigrants create demand. So if you look at cities that have been severely hurt, like Flint, Michigan, this is not from immigration. This is from General Motors deciding we won't make auto parts in the United States. If you look at New Orleans before Katrina, black people had no competition from immigrants, but had horrible jobs, horrible wages, and died in the flood because they didn't have transportation to leave the flood. So where you don't have immigrants does not mean that black people prosper. When you have immigrants, you create demand. What do we do as a people? Disproportionately, black people are employed in transportation. If you show me a community that's shrinking and dying, they don't have public transportation, they're not hiring bus drivers, they're not hiring subway engineers. So we gain jobs from having increased demand. New York City is vibrant because of immigration. If you look at Los Angeles, it's vibrant because of immigration. So there is a plus to immigration. Is it true that those with the least amount of education might be competition? Well, yes, but African Americans overwhelmingly are high school graduates or more. In fact, if African Americans are overwhelmingly higher educated workers. 45% of unemployed blacks are high school education. Another 48% have more than a high school education. Only a small percentage of unemployed black people are dropouts. The reason African Americans face a problem in unemployment is because if you are a white high school dropout, you have the unemployment rate of a black person with an associate's degree.
Yes, sir.
Carol?
That's why we have a problem with unemployment.
Carol, go ahead.
I'd like to speak to, I'd like to speak to the larger issues that he's referring to. Immigration has been out of control for decades, and the wall is not meant to solve all the problems. That's just one component. We need to totally reform our immigration laws. We need to do something about the people who overstay their visas.
And
40% of the undocumented persons in the country are people who overstayed their visas.
But Carol,
and blacks are hurt the most.
But Carol, I want you to respond to what Bill said. He laid out, you talked about New Orleans, talked about New York and LA.
Yeah, I heard all of that.
Okay, so I want you to respond to that where he says that, okay, so respond to what he says in terms of it not hurting black people. Go ahead.
Yeah, there are communities that parts of Detroit and different places where immigrants have moved in and they've set up businesses. That's not relevant to the discussion about what the impact immigration as a whole has on the black community and low-wage, low-skilled workers. And in those communities where you have lots of immigration, even if the immigrants are working 3 and 4 jobs, as many of them are, they're not making enough money to not be poor. And so that's a greater burden on the education system. And there have been studies to show that blacks are getting worse education now because all the focus is on trying to educate people from many different languages.
Wait.
I'm speaking to it. I'm speaking to what he has to say.
Hold on, Carol. You just said there are many different studies that show that the money is going to educate folks.
No, I'm telling you that I want to deal with what he discussed.
Right.
You all can have all the fun you want later,
I do too.
Now,
Carol, first of all, that's why. Carol, hold on. Carol, that's why you're here and Bill is here. I'm the one who booked the segment, so I know why you're here. Now go ahead and finish your point, then I'm going to Bill.
Then.
Well, you talked literally for 2 straight minutes, but go ahead.
See, what we really need to be concerned about is the overall impact on the communities. When you have large numbers of undocumented persons or people that don't speak the languages, it impacts the schools.
No. But Carol, how does that impact black people?
Communities.
No, the discussion.
It pushes them. It affects their ability. Like now, all of those people that we are allowing to stay, they're going to be competing for housing with black people and other poor people, and so it affects the housing. It affects every segment of society, and the people hurt the most are not just black people, but low-wage, low-skilled Americans.
Bill,
and it's time for us to put Americans first.
Bill, please respond.
America first.
So the increasing demand for housing can be a good thing because it increases demand for the services that go with it, which means you create jobs. If you look at Appalachia and you look at dying parts of rural America, their complaint is no one wants to live here. We don't have the space or the economy to grow, and our kids are leaving. And many of those places, the only people who have come in to keep those rural, isolated places alive have in many cases been immigrants. So it's not this competition that you suggest. What we do get are from people who want to continually pit worker against worker, not increasing the size of the economy in response to a growing labor force. And so the problem isn't having workers, the problem isn't raising wages, the problem is not maintaining labor standards, and that's the problem that we have right now. We have to do a better job of improving labor standards, and yes, if we granted those workers status so that they could fight with their employers, so that they didn't fear being deported, if we could regularize them, then yes, those workers would be a plus to the economy. It hurts to lower labor standards for any set of workers, whether it's African Americans returning from being incarcerated who must work at any wage or face going back. It's bad for any set of workers to be put in that position of a disadvantage versus their employer. And we have to level the playing field. We have to give workers the right to bargain and to negotiate. And of course, if workers aren't here with status, that does hurt them. But the key is, if you want to be in a community that's vibrant, that's growing, where the economy is expanding and creating opportunities, you have to have more people. The birth rate to native-born Americans, white and black, has been declining. And so if America is going to grow, it's going to have to grow from having more people from many different sources.
All right,
we
Carol,
just have to be open to that.
Give you the final word, go.
I think that we need to look at the immigration problem as a whole, and that we need to reform immigration. And I think the wall is one part of it. And I think we need to be fair about the things that President Trump has done that's benefit Americans as a whole. And so my position is that we need the barriers. We cannot absorb all the people who want to live here in America. If we have open borders, then most of the world would want to come to America. Many people, there have been surveys about this.
Okay.
And so I think the situation is much more complicated than it's being portrayed.
Well, first of all, we went into detail. I thought Bill was pretty damn specific. Laying
Certain
those
aspects
things.
of it, but not. It's much more complicated than
Yeah,
we lay it out there.
well,
That's one part of it.
but Carol, I was waiting for you to offer these other stuff that you were talking about.
And I'm trying to do the best I can in
Carol,
a situation that's clearly hostile
but
towards anyone that's conservative.
Carol,
Yes.
Carol, hold up. Let me help you out. Now, I used to see you on Lou Dobbs' show.
Yes.
It's two people who have been talking, you and Bill. Okay, this is not hostile.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Carol,
Thank you.
this is not hostile. It's not like the whole panel here. So please don't try to jump to that old conservative tactic of, oh my God, it's a hostile environment.
Well, I mean, I listened to the show
Carol,
before I came on, and so I heard nothing positive about the president or about conservatives.
Carol, first of
everything I
all,
heard was quite hostile.
Carol, this discussion had nothing to do with Donald Trump. This discussion was about what he had to say about black people and Latinos being hurt by immigration.
He's absolutely right. They are hurt by immigration,
and that's why I offer you the opportunity to say it. Now, if you want,
my book.
But Carol,
Read
no,
my book,
hold
and
on,
there are chapters on it.
Carol, here's very simple. Bill offered a litany of details, and you had the opportunity to do so. Now, if you couldn't get it done in time, that ain't on me.
I have a full book on it. So if you want to be educated about it,
Carol,
you can read the chapter that has to do with the Black Caucus, Black unemployment, and the impact on American workers.
Okay, Carol, all right, but here's the deal. So we had no issue discussing this, but this was not hostile. So try that on somebody else's show. You had an opportunity and was given it to be able to make your points, but it wasn't hostile. Nice try.
Roland,
it didn't work.
Seeing you.
All right, Carol.
And take care.
All right, you take care. You have a good one. All right, then. Rena, go. I know you want to go ahead. I know you want to go real quick. I'm going to go to Randy Weingart next, but go ahead.
Let me go real quick because I'm a conservative. I don't support the wall. I don't think we have extremely porous borders. You know, I just think the arguments you made are those that Republicans should embrace. Talking about competition, the markets. I mean, this is something that Republicans should really applaud. Is that there's credo to the argument that honestly, there are some groups that are faring badly because our cities are dead. I am the daughter of legal immigrants, a surgeon that immigrated to southern West Virginia in '71 because of the coal mines, and a woman who was a lawyer and did not practice there. It was the gold mine, my mother said. The coal mine was the gold mine. Why? Because there were jobs. And now that county that I was born and raised in is the epicenter of the opioid epidemic.
Right.
Why? Why? There's no jobs. People don't want to leave there.
There you go.
I was one of those kids who left. Now my brother's gone back. We inject into the economy. We are new Americans, but that's what happens. That argument you made, it's just practical. And I'm not hearing Carol. I'm just not. I'm sorry,
you can't
Carol.
just say read my book. So real quick, Monique, then Joe. Then I got to go to my next topic.
All right. I just want everybody to not miss what Trump does and how it just worked in this episode. He tells the white man to be afraid of everybody of color because we're the ones taking the jobs. Then he gets on there and tells the blacks and the browns to be afraid of the illegals because the illegals are going to take the jobs. It is peddling hate and it is peddling fear and it's lies. The statistics prove what we all know. Black people are coming out with so much education that they do not want the domestic worker jobs that the illegal immigrants and the legal immigrants are coming and taking in the workforce. They are not taking jobs.
Ain't no white folks gonna be out there picking oranges and lettuce. Joe, go ahead real quick.
Education is the currency of the 21st century. And what you see coming to the United States are usually people who lack education. And that's not just happening in the United States, that's happening all over. But isn't it amazing that he opens up his speech yesterday saying unemployment is hurting blacks, but in the same breath, when he gets in front of other people, he says this is the highest employment statistics that we've had in the history of the United States. And then finally, let me say this. If you really want to deal with this issue of employment and who gets hurt, here's what you ought to do. You ought to frog march the owners of these businesses who sit up here, know these folks are illegal, underpay them. And the reason they hire them because they're illegal, because they can't complain.
I'm sorry, you mean like the person where they forged documents at his golf course in New Jersey, or the guy?
The occupant.
Yeah, the guy in the White House who
Yes.
did the very same thing, and then down there in Florida at Mar-a-Lago, they keep saying, "Hey, we can't hire any Americans. Can we keep hiring folks from outside the country?"
Absolutely. And my mother-in-law, God bless her, and her whole family came from Oklahoma after the Dust Bowl, went to California, worked in the vineyards, and then what happened was they complained about the working conditions. And as soon as they complained about the working conditions, they got fired.
Boom.
And then who took their place? And these, by the way, were educated African Americans who had degrees from places like Langston.
But they were frozen out of other places. That's the only place where they could work.
That's absolutely
There you go.
right.
Exactly.
All right, first of all, Bill Spriggs, thanks for breaking that down for us. We appreciate that. Now, you want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.